What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Our Two Cents. Chris Dobson, Gerry Green. Yes, I am back. Before we get started, Gerry, I want to give a big shout out to producer Jay for filling in last week. Absolutely a gem when we get his insights into the show. That way there, it's good to see his face every once in a while. So I loved it. Great episode last week, but we are back, Gerry. We've got a lot to talk about because since you guys recorded last week, a lot has happened. The QMJHL playoffs have been underway. There is a lot to talk about there. There's a lot to digest and unfold because some weird things are happening. And we're going to start, of course, in the North Shore because we've got to talk about the Acadie Bathurst Titan and what's going on with them in Halifax. They went into Halifax, of course, and I think, I'm not going to say shocked the city, but I will say shocked the city a little bit. When the rumors came on out, of course, with Jordan Dume being suspended, he was supposed to miss game one of that in Halifax. Then apparently in warm-up, something's come on out that he is still injured and he couldn't partake again, although he was apparently ready to go. Interesting take there. But then, of course, so Bathurst goes into Halifax, steals both games in Halifax, then goes back to Bathurst last 2 nights ago, and they pumped them 7-2. And as we're recording this show right now, I mean, the fourth game hasn't happened yet, but are you surprised? Like, how wild has this been?
Well, besides Dume, the Mooseheads lost their captain Jake Furlong, and he's a big part of their team too. But they still got Canafor, they still got some awful good talent up front, and they got Rousseau in the nets. So, to get 7 by him as the Titan did the other night, and the other 2 games in Halifax were 2-1, 2-1. So those were good battles. It's simple in the playoffs, Chris. You need good goaltending, and you have to be opportunistic. And the other thing is, when you have an opponent down, you got to make sure you keep your foot on their neck. And that's what Bathurst has done. And Gordy Dwyer seems to have done a very quiet job up there. And I was looking through their lineup and some of the drafts, these players, these new faces that I don't recognize the names as well as I should. I check on all of them, and they're all draft picks, and they're all just getting their feet wet in the league. So Bathurst has a lot of excitement going on up in the North Shore. They had a big crowd for game number 3.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're going to have a big crowd for game number 4, where the other team that we thought might do well in this postseason, from a New Brunswick perspective, is the Moncton Wildcats, who got to start, Chris, at home with 2 games against Chicoutimi, and it didn't go very well, and they find themselves on the brink of elimination.
You're right, they do. And you talk about, we've talked about Moncton and their home ice. I'm not even going to call it advantage because all season long, they've played better on the road than they have at home. After game 1, and you saw the way the team had responded, if you check any social media account, if you're a referee, please don't, because the abuse that officials took from Wildcat fans after game 1, which was unwarranted. And you know me, Gerry, I'm not biased toward officials, but I also have no problem calling them out. Moncton took 2 very undisciplined penalties with very important people being ejected from that game at 5-minute majors, one of them being suspended for 2 extra games. They basically played the entire third period shorthanded. There's no way you're going to come on in. Chicoutimi, look, they capitalized on all of the mistakes Moncton made. So then game 1 happens. Okay, you forget about it. You move on. You go to game 2. They back at home. Okay, everything's fine. Reset. No, Chicoutimi still comes out. And Moncton looked good for a good chunk of that game. I thought they were going to pull that win out. And then in game 3 up in Chicoutimi, again, Moncton held the lead for a good chunk of that game and then just seemed to not put it together and collapsed late in the third. You got to feel for this Wildcat team, but something's not right. You look at Dan Lacroix, for an example, and he is taking some necessary criticism right now, and I think it's very warranted. If you look at the team, the way Moncton's played, something's not gelling. The line combinations aren't there. There should be a lot of changes coming. I just don't know. If Moncton gets swept, we'll start by not even just winning. If Moncton gets swept in this series, there's going to be a new head coach for the Moncton Wildcats next season. Mark my words for it. There's no question.
It's going to be tough because you play 3 in Chicoutimi and you lost game number 3 in Chicoutimi, and they still have 2 more tries to wipe you off the board. But Chris,
I hate the 2-3-2 format.
We're being a little too critical about the fact that the Moncton Wildcats really, who finished third in the conference, and then you had Cape Breton, Rimouski, and Chicoutimi, but all only separated by 5 points, Chris. It was very tight from there to there, in that the fact that Moncton finished third in the conference, I have a feeling they're still kind of grooming themselves for a much better attack at a championship for next season. So the fact that, and again, playoff hockey and hockey in general is very random, a bounce here, a penalty here or there, and a break here or there, and a series can turn on a dime, and that's where Moncton has found themselves. But the biggest story for me, Chris, is coming out of Cape Breton, where the Eagles, who won 9 straight to end the regular season, of which 5 of them were on the road because the World Women's was being held in Sydney, have now won 3 straight over Rimouski, who's a really good team, and have a chance to sweep them. This is going to happen in Rimouski, might be a tougher challenge, but you have to applaud, like you have, the Cape Breton Eagles and what they've done to turn their season around and really look one of those teams you do not want to play now in the playoffs.
No.
I think they will eliminate Rimouski, and I think they'll be ready to take on anybody who wants to take them on.
Oh, I fully agree. And to see the excitement coming out of Cape Breton right now, I follow Pat McNeil pretty heavy on social media, and, seeing the goal call, seeing the excitement, you talked about Bathurst and like the crowd support that's going on there. What's happening in Sydney right now is unbelievable. And, if every year it feels like we've been on Eagles watch, or before then screaming Eagles watch. It's like they're supposed to be good. They're supposed to be good. And then they went through that lull period. And I don't think anybody had them pegging going on that 9-game winning streak to close out the season. And then all of a sudden they became the hottest team in the Quebec Maritime Junior Hockey League. And as this is kind of going on, the momentum is rolling, you get Rimouski in round 1, and then Cape Breton continues to keep rolling because, again, everyone talks about, hey, are you worried that your team might flame out? You had a hot streak now. They got hot at the right time, and you're absolutely right, Gerry. Cape Breton right now doing what they're doing. It's fun for the Q. It's fun for the Maritimes. I was looking up some numbers statistically here, and, if you look at some of the top teams who are in this thing, look at their power plays, look at their penalty kills. I was looking at percentages, and of course, right around that tier, you got your Baie-Comeau, Bathurst. Bathurst right now has almost got a 31% power play with a 100% penalty kill. Again, you have to look at that. But Cape Breton at 27.3, 71.4. But going back to that Moncton series, this is quickly where I looked at it, where the numbers jumped off the charts for me. Moncton's power play percentage, Gerry, get this, 8.3%.
Yeah.
You're never going to get a win that way.
Yeah, you need your special teams.
But either way, kudos to Bathurst and kudos to Cape Breton.
Right.
But on the same time, let's talk about St. John for a minute, because the St. John Drummondville series, yes, it's going exactly the way people thought it was going to go. But look, St. John making the postseason this year too was one of those things where it's like, okay, we were unsure up until the last little bit whether or not St. John was going to make the playoffs. This could be a good experience for these guys.
Oh, no, it absolutely will be. And Drummondville and Baie-Comeau are still, in my mind, cream of the crop. Rouyn-Noranda ran into a bump with Gatineau, but I still think those 3 along throw Victoriaville in there a little bit too as well. But I certainly think Baie-Comeau and Drummondville are going to meet in a final. And both of them are Baie-Comeau's playing in Charlottetown and should probably sweep through them. And then I think Drummondville has a game in St. John and probably will handle them, because all the statistics that I saw and the highlights that I saw, lopsided shots on goal and those types of things. So I think it'll be status quo for the ones at the top. Really shocked by some of the teams that might or could be swept in the first round of the Q.
Yeah, I fully agree. Other than that, anything else in the Q really surprise you? Or have you?
No, not at
really
all. It's just nice. I just like this time of year. The sun's a little bit warmer. The snow's melting, and you're going to the rink and enjoying playoff hockey.
Says snow's melting as there's a snowstorm on its way. All right, let's talk about the National Hockey League because that's starting to wind down too. We're sub 10 games left in the NHL before the playoffs start. Let's talk about the Canucks, who at one point were the hottest team in the league, and then all of a sudden, is it time that we start to worry a little bit with what's going on in Vancouver?
No, I still think the ingredients are there. What the ingredient that has been missing is Thatcher Demko. Demko's been out since March 9th, and the team's been 4-4-1 since he left. So you tell me. I think it's the goaltending or the goaltender or the fact that it's even back there. I'm not discrediting any of the goaltenders that they brought in since, But as a player, when you've got your guy back there, you can maybe do things a little bit differently than you might not do if the backup is in. Okay, so I think Vancouver will rectify themselves. They've got a lot of great offense. They've got a solid defense. And once Demko gets back and gets in between the pipes for the playoffs, everything will just be fine. They just got through a 100-point plateau, which was a major thing for them. And maybe that mentally might have been something they were distracted by. But I think they'll be just fine.
I fully agree. It's a great take. Next up, I want to talk, because last week you and Jason talked about the final 2 playoff spots. Washington, Philadelphia, and Detroit were the teams you guys had mentioned last week. I would love to get your take. Is there a chance the Islanders or even Pittsburgh could sneak into there? Or do you think it's pretty lock solid with those 3?
Yes, Chris. Throw 4 teams in right now that are 3 points apart, and that includes Pittsburgh, that includes the Islanders, and Detroit and Washington. Now, Washington can jump up and knock Philly back down too, but here's the thing, though, Chris. You got 7 games left. If you're any one of those teams, if you really want to make the playoffs, you got to win 5 or 6 of the next 7 to get a chance in, because you've got to make up some ground in the case of, Pittsburgh and the Islanders, and you need the other teams to stumble a little bit. We've talked about that before. Sure, you can win a bunch of games, but those guys in front of you, they have to stumble down. And there's been a lot of stumbling going on, Winnipeg Jets, that's been going on all over the league, where you've got a lot of teams playing at 5-5, 4-6, 6-4. Those types of records of late, because it's getting tight. But if you want to get into the playoffs of any of those teams in the East, you need to win 5 or 6 of your next 7.
Gerry, we need to talk about Dallas. Once a year we talk about how good they are. Today is that day. I mean, how good do the Dallas Stars look right now?
Well, they're the hottest team in the NHL, Chris. I'm talking about teams that are mediocre, that are going 5-5 and 6-4. They won their last 7 in a row. They're 8-2. They're dangerous even on the road. They've got a good home record, but even more dangerous on the road. But what do you know about them? They have solid goaltending. Have great leadership in Ben up front. They've brought up some rookies here and there, and they've got some great Europeans. But I couldn't throw a bunch of names at you, Chris, that are household names that would jump off the top of my head to tell you. But I know they're scary to watch, especially at home, but they've got a tremendous road record.
So do you remember the start of the year when we were talking about Connor McDavid being in a slump and all of a sudden everyone was worried about it? Yeah, me neither. So let's talk about Connor McDavid for a minute, because as far as like the Connor McDavid's one of the greatest to ever do it claims already, look, he's at 97 assists at this point. He's got 9 games to go. When he gets 3 more assists, he'll become the 4th player to hit 100 assists in a season. Listen to this, and I'm glad I had these notes, which is why I'm looking at them. Joining Gretzky 11 times, Mario once, Bobby Orr once, Zach Hyman owes him a steak dinner, or maybe 52 of them. I don't know. But nobody's capitalized more than this. Connor McDavid's an absolute legend. I mean, no surprise here, but do you think there's a chance? Is there worry that they could see the Oilers start to fizzle out again like they have the last couple of years? I would think Oilers fans would lose their mind.
I thought Bobby Orr did it more than once, but Bobby was leading scorer in the NHL a couple of times. That's a defenseman leading the league in scoring. But nothing surprises me about Connor McDavid, about his ability to do what he wants, when he wants, and sometimes the assist he needs to get things done. And that's what he needs in Edmonton. He needs some guys to assist him. I think the Henrique trade, and I think you know who he is, number 90. His name escapes me now. They got him from
Corey
Chicago.
Perry.
Corey Perry. I think that is so underrated, Corey Perry's
fully agree. We talked about
experience, his exposure, his way of doing things is rubbing off on the team. It might be the missing ingredient. I find Edmonton very scary, and I hope that their goaltending isn't going to be what sinks them. But Connor McDavid and this 100 assist plateau is a tremendous milestone. And which one do you, Chris, think is more valuable? The goals that Austin Matthews scores, or the 100 assists that Connor McDavid might accomplish this season?
Look, I'm a little biased here, and I don't want to take anything away from Austin Matthews and how this looks, because obviously, I
Yes.
mean, anybody who does. But if you're going to sit here and tell me, look, Austin Matthews, I think he's 60-second goal. He's firing them into the empty net at this point. Don't think for 2 seconds the Leafs aren't going to put him out the ice when the net's empty. Connor McDavid putting this team on his back and doing what he does, leading this team the way he does,
Yeah.
not even close. But overall, Gerry, I want to move on because I want to talk about the greatest player in the history of the NCAA when it comes to
The
basketball.
game of the week, Chris. It's the game of the week.
We got to talk about Caitlin Clark, Gerry. Look, she's close. She can claim another record, the most watched women's college basketball game in history. You know, Iowa's 94-87 win over LSU in the Elite Eight. I was looking at the numbers, and I want to make sure I get it right here. Averaged 12.3 million viewers on ESPN. According to Nielsen, that makes it one of the most viewed games in any sport other than NFL football over the past year. Iowa LSU outdrew all but one of 5 games in last year's NBA Finals, along with the clinching game of last year's World Series. She is a Steph Curry level shooter and will be the first overall pick in the WNBA draft this year. Indiana Fever have the first pick. Expect to see a lot of Fever jerseys at these basketball games. Look, what else can you say about Caitlin Clark? Unbelievable.
Yeah, it was even for G Green, it was highly anticipated. I wanted to see what was going to happen because I love the rivalry. I love when emotions involve. The LSU team was the defending champs. Who did they beat last year? They beat Iowa in the final. And so Caitlin Clark in her final season, wanting to come back and make it happen. Yes, the gestures, the cockiness at times of LSU, their coach, who's very flamboyant. You just want to see somebody get it rubbed in their face. And I thought LSU had a chance to win. They would throw the ball down low to the very talented Angel Reese, big, tall center who couldn't be touched, and then sprain the ankle, and it seemed to change the whole reflection of the game. And Caitlin Clark just coming out and taking charge like Steph Curry and hitting 3-pointers that you cannot defend. You cannot defend them. It was fun to watch. It lived up to my expectations. Very entertaining basketball game.
The Caitlin Clark hype is very real. Let's talk quickly about the men's side because the Final Four is also this weekend. We got to talk about Canadian Zach Edey with Purdue.
Sure we do.
What an absolute look. He has crushed my March Madness pool. I do have Purdue winning the whole thing in that bracket. At the same time, look, he might have even won me a couple shekels betting on his rebound totals and his point totals. But overall, Zach Edey, absolute beauty of a basketball player. I saw him cut down the net the other day without needing the ladder. Thought that was wonderful. Have you been paying a lot of attention to the last to the Elite Eight?
I absolutely have, and I know NC State is the underdog going up against Purdue. Now, Purdue's ranked number 1 in their region.
Big man versus big man, though. It could be good.
UConn, the University of Connecticut, is ranked number 1 in their region. So UConn's meeting Alabama and Purdue's meeting NC State. And that happens on Saturday night, Chris, just so people know. At 7 o'clock, you're going to see the Purdue game. And at 10 o'clock, you're going to see the UConn and Alabama game. It's being played in Glendale, Arizona. And the girls, by the way, are going to be the women rather, are going to be played Friday at 8 p.m. And then you've got Iowa and UConn, which will be the great game Friday at 10:30. That's all our time. I just want to make sure people knew that because it's not always easy to find where you're going to watch these games.
Look, I want to stick on basketball, switch to NBA real quick because I have to mention, we've got to talk about Victor Wembanyama. I mean, in case you haven't been paying attention since he went first overall, he's already a legit superstar, averaging 21 points, 10.5 boards, 3.7 assists, 3.5 blocks, and a steal. His last game against the defending champ Nuggets, who have the same guy named Jokic, maybe you've heard of him, playing center. Look, he put up 23 points and 15 boards. I'm sorry. First year, everyone thought this guy was going to get pushed around. I think it's safe to say that San Antonio's got a legit superstar and fans have a reason to be excited.
He was, and I saw the highlights, Chris. Didn't get to watch the game live, but he blocked Jokic a couple of times.
Yeah.
And Jokic thought he had a clear path to the hoop. He's got such a wingspan. He's a very unique individual, and it's funny how you've got Edey and Wembanyama, all these big guys that are coming from college and really changing how the NBA might possibly handle them in the future. It's really fun to watch the big man in action.
Oh, I fully agree. And, like I said, everybody should be excited about that. The NBA is back in full force. Those playoffs start. All right, Gerry, it is time for the Atlantic Scene with Gerry Green.
Well, the Atlantic scene this week focuses on hockey. And of course, we're into playoff hockey, specifically the MHL. The MHL is finally down to their final four. So you have two division finals going on. In the South, you have Summerside Western Capitals taking on the Amherst Ramblers and have jumped out to a lead in that best of seven. Summerside's the number one seed, and Amherst finished second in the Southern Division as well. So they're appropriate combatants to be in the final for the Southern Crown. Meanwhile, in the North, the Edmonton Blizzard finished first, and they've been sitting and waiting to see who they're going to play. Well, it was finally decided after a number of days, but only 5 games. The Miramichi Timberwolves bump off the West Kent Steamers, who finished second in the division. Timberwolves finished third. So they win it in 5 games, and now they'll move on to take on Edmundston, which will start on Friday in Edmundston, and then go to Miramichi on Sunday for game number 2. It was a hard-fought series. The West Kent Steamers, their first season in Bucktouche, very successful. And I think the Miramichi Timberwolves are somewhat playoff ready to take on Edmundston, who breezed through the Fredericton Canadians, or the Fredericton Red Wings, rather, in the first round in 4 straight, and they've been sitting for 14 days. It'll be an interesting start to game 1 in the North Final, which starts on Friday. Meanwhile, the Atlantic Major under 18 Atlantic start this weekend, and the Moncton Flyers, representing the New Brunswick PEI circuit, if you will be there, along with the Pinnacle Growlers of Newfoundland, the Kensington Wild of PEI, who won that championship by beating Charlottetown, and you have the Halifax McDonald's, who are the league champions in Nova Scotia. It's the Steel Subarus who are going to be the host of the event that's at East Hants Sportsplex in Lance, Nova Scotia. And if you didn't know, the TELUS Cup is in Atlantic Canada coming up on April 22nd. We'll talk about that more in shows to come. That's your Atlantic scene. Chris, I want to know what your 2 cents is about this week.
Every week I try to figure out a topic that's not personal, but I just can't do it because my opinion and my thoughts on it just rattle my chain. And this week, my 2 cents is about NFL general managers specifically. And the question I have is, how long does it take to be a mediocre GM in the National Football League before you finally get the boot? And where I'm going with this, Gerry, is that this week, the AFC South continued to get better. Tennessee got better this year in the offseason. Houston has gotten remarkably better. The big signing, of course, for them this week was Stephon Diggs out of Buffalo. Basically, that cost a pop machine, essentially, for Houston to acquire him from Buffalo. And then you've got Chris Ballard of the Indianapolis Colts, who sat around and signed everybody who was on his roster already. That was his big commitment. He's acknowledged that they need wide receiver help. So he went and extended Michael Pittman Jr. No problem. Have 0 issues with that. Love it. Great. But then, the problem is our secondary is awful. Anthony Richardson's coming into his sophomore season where he only played in total probably about a game and a half last year without getting hurt. He needs weapons. Now they're saying the draft is deep, but how do you allow Stephon Diggs to go into the division with CJ Stroud, who is the greatest rookie quarterback in the history of rookie quarterbacks after last season? Don't see him hitting a sophomore slump. Everything points to the fact that you could have had Stephon Diggs. Look, the cap hit comes expensive, no doubt about it. But I'm sick and tired of Chris Ballard saying these things to the media. And as being in the media, you hear these things all the time. It's, oh, you know what? We believe in our own side first. We want to promote our own people first. We want to sign them. Look, Ballard's going into his 7th or 8th season. I think I'm trying to remember where he started 2017. His record since he's become the general manager is 54, 60, and 1 with 2 playoff appearances, no playoff wins. Now get it. Yeah, Andrew Luck retired. Who cares? Move on. You've had 17 quarterbacks. You finally found your guy. There was a weapon available for a 2nd-round pick next year, and they also require... Anyways, the division in the AFC South got good. If Chris Ballard doesn't move up in the draft and get Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm done with Chris Ballard. He can take a long walk off a short walk off a long cliff for all I care at this point. I'm done. Be better. As a Colts fan, I hate it. That's my 2 cents on this, Gerry. How are you feeling? What's going on in your world tonight?
Well, as usual, Chris, my 2 cents focuses around hockey, as we've had a lot of hockey talk, and it's that time of year where you get that playoff fever on your mind. But it doesn't deal with playoffs; it deals about draft. And the NHL draft, which comes up on June 28th, is in Las Vegas. They're going to have it in the Sphere. That's exciting enough.
Love
But
it.
the unfortunate part of it all is it's going to be the last draft of which the NHL, in their traditional way, will have teams, all the representatives at tables and going onto the stage and calling up the pick that they are making. I find it's a classic NHL, but I found it more classic Canadian. And I think it's going to become Americanized because it was classic Canadian to have Carey Price go up and mispronounce or forget who he was going to call. Bobby Clark going up and forgetting to call Claude Giroux's name properly. And those have become classic clips. Now you're going to be sanitized and pasteurized with, I don't know if Gary Bettman's going to stand up there and go, the first pick for the Montreal Canadiens is Chris Dobson from Moncton. And then, whatever happens from that. That is so painful to me that we're going to turn into the NFL and the NBA in the way they do it. And their commissioner stands there and hugs these guys like he's their best friend when he's not. His best friends are the guys that are in the ownership boxes, be it Silver from the NBA or Goodell from the NFL. I don't like the structure of the way those drafts are done. And now the NHL is going to turn that way as well. I don't know what's about money. I don't know if it's about conformity. I don't know which one it's about. To the teams, I mean, money-wise, of bringing teams and their whole entourage, scouting staff and everything. And it's kind of a reward thing at the same time. I had a scout tell me it's a real reward to get to go to the draft, but it's not going to be that way anymore. They're going to be in isolated areas and sending their picks in. And this commissioner, Bettman, Silver, Goodell, they get the glory of announcing the pick and being in all the photos, which makes me a little sick. That's my 2 cents this week. For Chris, I'm Gerry. Hope you enjoyed the show. See you next week on Our 2 Cents.